All right, so we're gonna get along with the program. Our first keynote is from Jerry. Jerry's leading the FinTech distributed ledger technology practice for the financial service market unit and has led numerous efforts since 2013. She specializes in business case development and operational design for next generation market structures, anchored in distributed ledger technology. That's blockchain, right? Jerry has over 22 years of experience of capital markets with a focus on transformative initiatives, but not limited to front to back office redesign and automation. Wow, that's a lot. Collateral optimization. Some recent projects include a successful inter-entity asset servicing POC with a large global insurance provider, business design and POC to pilot a new deposit-based market utility, and multiple end-to-end business case assessments with global investment banks and insurance providers. With that being said, let's welcome Jerry.
Hi, everyone. That was like a really long bio. I need the clicker. I'm actually going to peruse the slides. Oh, it's right here. No bueno? Oh, that's fine. Okay, I'll just keep going. So you're going to keep me to time, right? Because we have 15 minutes, and Lord knows I can spend like 4 hours. So very quickly, just so I can gauge the audience, how many people in the room actually feel like they understand what blockchain is? Awesome. That's good. How many people are actively working on blockchain? Nice. Okay. Can anybody tell me why we probably shouldn't call it blockchain? Any more? Go ahead.
I think there we go. This will be good.
If I understand it right, the name actually started as Bitcoin. The protocol's named Bitcoin.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. So I have a larger deck here, but it's titled, as you can see, Distributed Ledger Technology and Financial Services. Perfect. So bypass. I think it's the other clicker. This is the imposter.
Oh, you gotta hit the right
Oh, got it. Excellent. So this is a general slide that continues to change. I've been in the space since I started consulting in 2010. I was focusing initially on peer-to-peer messaging systems, and encryption technology was sort of a separate thing. In late 2013, I got a call from a crypto exchange. I had been looking into Bitcoin, etc., and I helped them build out back office and attain a trust license, temporary, stateside. This was during that time when no one really understood whether it was an asset, whether it was a commodity, etc. I embraced it because for many years, since I started in the business in the early 90s, we've been trying to build straight-through processing. Then we saw the advent of the dot-com e-commerce boom, and we realized we were able to buy and sell something over the internet relatively securely. Many, many hops and layers behind the scenes, but what Bitcoin proved, and then soon thereafter Ethereum, and then the emergence of Internet of Things, which quite simply is the incorporation of detection mechanisms, such as GPS, temperature, and being able to signal those events over the internet. It really showed that a convergence of these technologies could provide a means for straight-through processing over the internet, establishing trust between either known counterparties or unknown counterparties, to not only transact, but negotiate in a true business sense. So the usage of smart contracts, peer-to-peer, in a much more traditional private model, although the models are emerging where it's a blend between private and public. And all of this is sort of happening depending on the line of business, is happening in different clusters. We're seeing DLT, distributed ledger technologies, sort of happening a bit sooner from an intra-entity internal perspective, happening much quicker, versus happening in sort of a large public version. That's being separate from the crypto side. So that's sort of what the landscape is shaping up. We see people focusing, where they're focusing on just automation, is quickly coming into optimization, using AI, taking AI and using that data that they've been mining to then build applications peer-to-peer with trusted third parties and build new market structures. Sorry. Okay. This slide is, I'll go through this quickly. I mean, this is basically summarizing, when you look at DLT, the number one thing that's been slowing people down is we've spent a few years doing very experimental POCs, right? So we've built some things, we've done some consortia, we built something and it was kind of apples and oranges, versus trying to fix these problems. And they're general problems that the industry, both the insurance side and the investment banking and capital market side, have been trying to solve for. The reconciliation burden, real-time access to risk data and events that impact risk profiles, efficiency and overall reporting at an aggregate global scale. This is a big one, guys. Project with a large client, and I think I said sheet management 420 times a day. And dynamic real-time aggregate view of exposure and liquidity. Exposure, again, managing risk, having much more nimbleness to distribute risk, all across a single shared source of data. Right? These are the features and the value props that everyone's been talking about. This slide is very quickly, I think I touched on it already. Distributed ledger technology is an architectural methodology. It is not one single type of protocol. It's not one single type of token framework. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of the larger scale clients come up with their own protocols, their own software stacks, and looking to white label. So again, the way the transformation is going to happen is not going to be some big bang watershed moment, but rather large clusters, specific key players who have the lion's share of a particular market are going to drive that change forward, but with their primary driver being securing their lion's share of that particular market. And when I say DLT, we're talking about the fundamentals of peer-to-peer communications, transaction framework. A blockchain build a data taxonomy and a messaging standard that everyone agrees on. You've still got to build that. Blockchain doesn't fix that. You need to build the right kind of smart contract framework. So let's make sure that we don't have any illusions here about where the heavy lifting is. And having said that, this is what we mean really by smart contract workflows. And this, in and of itself, has already evolved. Smart contracts, by design, were very point-to-point, negotiating individual terms through a web front end. But they're quickly changing broadcast-type models, where I have a policy and I want to broadcast it out to a predefined pool of brokers. So unique structures like that are emerging very quickly. This just walks through the core components. When we talk DLT, digitizable process, data integrity, using public-private key encryption, and others. Multi-party is a key requirement. Varying level of trust. Some are trusted third parties, others are trusted third parties of your trusted third party, etc. Deciding which data to share, because we keep saying transparency, but it really isn't just a universal transparency. The goal of DLT, and one of the features this brings, is you can tailor the transparency based on the role of the participant in the given workflow. And the other thing that's emerging very quickly is what's known as the passive node or the auditor node. The Big Four have been rigorously working on this for a few years, especially since the assurance business as a whole has become more and more automated, and they see DLT and the emerging peer-to-peer transaction framework as the perfect segue into taking this continuous net auditing and creating a passive node that has very, very strict permissions whereby they can see all of the transactional data. With that, from a strictly sort of, some of these are not just insurance related, but the biggest ones, payments and billing, this impacts everyone. From financial services perspective, also has huge consumer impact. New tokenization schemes are emerging within DLT framework. You've heard of some. Ripple is one, using its own native cryptocurrency that is a tradable asset. Fraud detection. There are a number of different fintechs and service providers arising, and we have a couple of clients actually building their own, doing very innovative things that they are turning around and then selling to their corporate clients. So there's a lot of white labeling opportunity there. The Internet of Things, huge impact. We did a project which was very successful, and that's now become a 6-year journey. Being able to basically create a real-time profile across property in Germany, so know your building, and it was surprisingly simple to do the first prototype, so it kind of sold itself. Claims processing, but starting from the very beginning, the full life cycle. Now, when you look at insurance and you look at from underwriting straight through to managing claims, as well as the fraud prevention piece there, it's a gargantuan amount of data. I dare say it's even more data than in the banking and capital markets perspective, quite frankly. And ascertaining that data and authenticating and ensuring the veracity of that data is a huge challenge. So the degree of integration is huge, so it's about compartmentalizing. Risk analysis, because you're able to aggregate and prove the source of said data. When you start looking at the metrics, algorithms that are used to understand your risk data, a lot changes and a lot's uncovered. It's been a learning exercise, actually. What you thought and how you thought you understood your risk data changes. So that's very much a work in progress, but there are tools built in, and you can also leverage AI in many respects to build an even smarter view of your actual risk position and exposure. Reinsurance is extremely popular, both with the banks, their insurance clients, and insurance as a whole. Huge opportunity there, a lot of different projects and a lot of different work going on. Again, I see a lot of different, I think there's going to end up being a few key winners, but this one's going to be a bit of a dogfight. And multinational policy, again, normalizing the data. When you work in different jurisdictions, different geographies, this has become a way to basically break down the size. This has been another one. This one I feel is taking a bit longer, but it is very, very popular. So I think am I getting close to time? So if you take anything away from this, and since 2013, which really feels like in blockchain years, it's like 50 years, it's been very intense as things continue to change radically on a daily basis. there's actually a third point I want to make here, but business first, tech second. Every day there's going to be a new token. Every day there's a new protocol. Every day something changes. Focus on what your business is and where you have some sphere of control of a given market, a particular segment, or a client. That is where you can steer change. Make sure that you focus on fixing those legacy problems that we've talked about, but there's got to be a net new service or product. If you start to go the apples, but apples on a blockchain, I can guarantee you nothing's going to happen. So you have to think about products and services that were only a bit of a pipe dream before, leverage these features, and use that as sort of the gateway to test drive these new products and services. Because otherwise, it's just not compelling enough commercial upside. It's been my experience in the last few years. I've seen a lot of different things fail. And the third is really, there's a third point. It's kind of a, and I want to close with this. We see a lot of consortia and a lot of different groups and a lot of different initiatives. There's a difference between groups like this, and there's a lot of different consortia / platforms emerging. And it's very difficult to hedge your bets. And the best thing that you can do is honestly diversify that portfolio a little bit. But stay focused on, don't put all your eggs in the basket, and use good judgment, because one of the biggest things that we get in my firm is advice in terms of where do I focus? And the best way to answer that is largely with where your core business is today. Right? If you weren't doing X, Y, or Z yesterday, blockchain is not going to help you do it tomorrow. It's the core competency, and the essential ingredient in all of this are people who understand the business today. I can't stress that enough. That's why a number of fintechs and startups have failed. Or they turn around for veterans from the street to come and help them take smart technology and actually commercialize it. I can't. When you work with fintechs and smart young people, make sure that you bring the veterans in who actually understand the core nature of the business. And that's it. Any questions? Go ahead.
I can talk about that. So you mentioned earlier the prevalence of auditor or the notary nodes within the various distributed ledger. Obviously, with clear text data, that's not really exciting to many of us in insurance. So how are you seeing how prevalent is it, and how are people getting around that?
They're going to. Oh, sorry. So the thinking right now is that it can be sold. So the model of before, in terms of deploying large teams to do attestations, now it's basically almost attestation as a service, and it can be white labeled, it can be installed internally, so it's kind of a question of what happens to the internal compliance teams. What I've seen thus far is those internal compliance teams become the people who model the data and build the profiles. So the job sort of changes in terms of the kind of pen you use and how you actually conduct those attestations. Does that make sense? It's a node, it's plugged into your environment, based on your requirements, and it's actually taking the data and then coming in and recompiling at certain times. It's worked in 2 instances, and we can talk more about it offline, but it's shaping up to be attestation as a service.